Good morning, all the students of 7th standard. We are learning the third lesson, that is tide. So, page number 11 is going on. The moon is closer to the earth than the sun. If you see that the moon is closer to the earth than the sun, hence its gravitational force become more effective than that of the sun. Then, so what is here? The gravitational force of the moon is more, it is greater than the sun. Tides occur due to the relative position of the moon, the sun, and the earth. So, in a sea or in the ocean, tides are generally they occur on the relative positions of the moon, the sun, and the earth. A place on the earth located at the opposite point of the place experiencing high or low tides also expresses or experience high or low tides respectively at the same time. What is here? The moon, if you see, it is closest to the earth from the sun. Hence, the gravitational force of the moon is greater than the sun. It is first thing that tides generally occur to the relative position of the moon, the sun, and the earth. A place on the earth located at the opposite point of the place experiencing high or low tide also experience high or low tides respectively at the same time. What is here? Whatever the place is there on the earth, that place express that high or low tide. So along with that, in the sea or in the ocean water also, that which is the remotest place or the area is also there, that place is also experiencing that expresses or experiencing respectively high or low tide there. Same time it's expressed that this is result of the centrifugal force, that when it expressed the high or low tide, that resulted into the centrifugal force. Centrifugal force means the force will be applied from the middle part and it will become toward the edge side, it will come toward the end side. Figure point 3.6 also show them and try to understand the location of the high and the low tide on the earth surface. High and the low tide, how it's occur that. When there is a high tide at a 0 meridian, the 180 meridian also experiencing the high tide. If the high tide is there at a 0 meridian, then at that time at 180 degrees meridian also express a high tide there, means opposite side, totally opposite. 180 means what is that? Totally opposite side of that part is also express the high tide, and that at which meridian will be low tide. So what is there? At 90 degree it will be low tide, 90 degree it will be low tide, then opposite of the 90 totally means 360 degree is also what is there? Low tide. 0, 180, 90, 360, like in this way they express the low tide here. Figure 3.6 is also tells us about the same only. Types of tides are there. As the time of the tide varies every day, timing of the tide is not same. It is in that variation is there, differences is there every day. The range of tide also keeps on changing, and whatever the range of tide is there, that range of tide is also not same. The range of tide is also changes continuously. It is not the same. Differences is there in that. Generally, the highest high tide occur on full moon or new moon days. Highest high tide, generally if you see that highest high tide, that high tide generally occur at a full moon day or at a new moon day, whereas on the days of the first and the third quarter, where if you see that on the first or the third quarter, on the day of the first or third quarter, high tide is at its minimum. Full moon or new moon day there, that time high tide is there, and on the first day or the third quarter day, third quarter, at that time if you see that high tide is at the minimum place, means lowest place. Spring tide and neap tide are also two types of tides are there, spring tide and neap tides. So we have seen that high tide and low tide. Along with that, what is that? Spring tide and neap tides. Next one point, that is spring and neap tide. What is meant by spring and what is meant by nape tide. So on generally what is that, on the new moon day or the full moon day high tide is there, and first day or the quarter day low tide minimum level is there, that is low tide we can call. So two types are there along with that, spring tide or the nape tide. So first of all we'll see about the spring tide. What is mean by spring tide here? On new moon and full moon days, the gravitational pull of the sun and the moon act in the same directions. What is there? Whenever there is on new moon day or the full moon day is there, at that time gravitational forces of the sun and the moon act in the same directions. Gravitational force is there, both sun or the moon they both applied gravitational force, so their gravitational force is in the same direction. So due to that high tide generated, the water level will be increased. When if the gravitational it is in opposite direction, that time it will not generate that much more pressure is not there or more tides are not there, but their force, gravitational force occur into the same directions. Due to this the total pull increase. Due to that what will happen, the total pull of the sun or the moon it increase, that more gravitational force will be so it will be applied, or gravitational force will increase. Hence the tide on these day is much higher than the average high tide. So what we can call that, the tide on the new moon or the full moon day is more than the general high tide, because on this day, new moon day or full moon day, gravitational force of the moon and the gravitational force of the sun, both gravitational force are pulled toward the same direction. So water level will be increased, so greater high tide will be occur. This is as a spring. So hence the tide on these day much higher than an average tide. This is known as a spring tide. To that we can call as a spring tide. When the gravitational force is more pressure is there, to that we can call as a spring tide. See the figure 3.7, as the bulge at the high tide is greater, the water of the low tide recedes much more we can say that level will be increased during the high tide. The water level during the spring tide is higher than the average high tide and lower than the average low there. Here figure it shows that map is also there, how the water level will be increased during the high tide and the low tide. Differences they shows through the stick, this color stick or that strips. So this we can understand by seeing this one. So when we will come tomorrow, then we will see the next one point, that is a nape tide. Till that time, use read out. Thank you.